Welcome back to the Book Nook, everybody.
Always a pleasure.
When you suggested Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art for us to, really dig into, I was so excited.
Yeah, it's a good one.
You'd mentioned that you were looking for some, really actionable advice on getting past those roadblocks we all hit when we're trying to create something, or, even just stick to a new routine.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think this book is just perfect for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So today, our mission is to kind of break down Pressfield's ideas and see if we can't pull out some concrete steps that our listeners can use, like right away.
Absolutely. I think that's a great approach to this book. And it's something that, Robert McKee in his foreword, he talks about how even at his level of success, he still struggles with
Oh,
procrastination.
for sure. I mean, who doesn't?
Right. So the war of art really gets at the heart of that internal resistance that we all feel. It's not just some personal flaw, it's a universal force. And Pressfield calls that resistance with a capital R.
Okay, so let's unpack this, right? Like,
Right.
who is this enemy? What is this resistance?
Exactly.
Pressfield gives a whole list of activities that seem to just attract it, like a magnet. Pursuing a creative art, like writing, painting, starting a business, getting healthier, any kind of personal growth, even breaking a bad habit.
Right.
So, listeners, think about that list for a second. Where do you feel that friction in your own life?
That's a great question. It's really important to personalize this.
Right. Where are you like, ugh, I really don't want to deal with that?
Yeah. And one of the things that Pressfield emphasizes is that this resistance isn't external.
Okay.
It's not just about a lack of time or resources. It's something that comes from within.
Ah, okay.
He's very specific about that. He almost personifies resistance. He says it lies to us. It rationalizes our inaction. It tempts us away from our work. It makes us feel inadequate. It'll do anything to keep us from doing what we know we should be doing.
Yeah, he really does paint a vivid picture. Like there's a saboteur living in our heads.
Yeah.
I love the way he uses those really intense analogies, comparing resistance to the alien or the Terminator.
Yes.
This relentless force that wants to crush our creative spark.
It really does feel like that sometimes.
I mean, how many times have you been like, I should really be working on that project, and suddenly you're like, but first, I must alphabetize my spice rack.
Right. It's that sudden urge to do anything other than the actual work. Classic sign of resistance.
Textbook case. But you know what I find really interesting is how Pressfield flips the script and says that resistance can actually act as a compass.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it points us towards what we need to be doing.
Because the more important something is for our growth, the more aligned it is with our, and he uses this phrase, soul's evolution,
I love that.
the more resistance we're going to feel.
So that thing you're avoiding, the thing that makes your stomach clench up, that might just be the most important thing for you to do.
Exactly.
It's like resistance is saying, hey, pay attention to this. This is big.
It's counterintuitive, but it's so true.
It is. It's a total reframe of procrastination. Like, oh, I'm avoiding this so hard. Maybe there's something here for me.
Right. Maybe I should lean into this instead of away from it.
Exactly. And he goes on to talk about the different ways resistance shows up. Procrastination is the obvious one, but he also talks about, excessive focus on sex, always stirring up drama, even the types of relationships we choose.
Yes.
Those can all be ways of avoiding the real work. Have you ever noticed that in your own life? When you're facing a big challenge, suddenly everything else seems more appealing.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. You're like, oh, I really should be focusing on this, but you know what? I really want to pick a fight with my partner right now.
Right. Or you get really drawn to someone who's going to distract you.
Totally. And Pressfield also connects resistance to those feelings of like dissatisfaction, boredom, restlessness, that nagging sense of guilt.
Yes. He talks about the unlived life.
Yes. It's like we have this sense that we're not fully expressing ourselves and that conflict creates those yucky feelings.
That low-grade misery.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting a clearer picture of this internal adversary.
Right.
So how do we actually fight it? How do we win this war? This is where Pressfield introduces that idea of turning pro.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what does that actually look like?
Well, he talks about this shift from an amateur mentality to a professional one.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very clear about the differences.
Okay.
Amateurs see their work as a hobby,
Mm-hmm.
something they do in their spare time when they feel like it. And their self-worth is all tied up in their successes and failures.
Right.
So they're terrified of failing.
I mean, that makes sense, right?
It does.
Like if you think of yourself as a writer and you're afraid of writing a bad first draft, well, guess what? You're never going to write anything.
Exactly. The stakes feel way too high.
Way too high. But professionals, on the other hand, approach their work as their calling.
Right.
It's a serious endeavor. It's what they do. And
Mm.
they don't over-identify with the outcome.
They can detach.
So they can handle setbacks and keep moving forward.
Exactly. They're in it for the long game.
And one of the most practical things Pressfield talks about is consistency.
Yes. Showing up.
Just showing up. Professionals show up every day, no matter what. He quotes Somerset Maugham, who said he only wrote when inspiration struck, which just happened to be every morning at 9 o'clock.
Right. Like clockwork.
So it's about building the habit, building the routine.
And the routine creates the inspiration.
Right. So for our listeners, what's one small thing you can commit to doing every day, even if it's just for 15 minutes?
That's a great challenge.
Just to start building that consistency.
That consistency is key.
Yeah. And Pressfield also talks about professionals accepting some kind of payment for their work.
Yes. It doesn't always have to be money.
Right. Especially when you're starting a personal project. It could be the satisfaction of making progress, the feedback you get, that feeling of accomplishment.
Or just the joy of doing the work itself.
Exactly.
But valuing your time and effort is really important.
Yeah, it's like saying, this is important to me. He also talks about honing your skills, mastering your craft and not taking yourself too seriously.
Having a sense of humor.
Yes.
So important.
That's so important. And being open to feedback, even when it's tough.
Oh, absolutely.
He tells that great story about working on the King Kong Live script and his friend just totally ripping it apart.
Yeah. It's brutal, but honest.
But instead of getting discouraged, Pressfield realized that facing that kind of real-world feedback was part of becoming a pro.
That's a rite of passage.
It is. He also highlights the need for discipline and order.
Yeah, creating a structured environment.
Professionals tend to create a space where they can focus.
Minimize distractions.
Right. It's about setting the stage for the muse to show up. They approach their work as a craft, they focus on the how, and they trust that the what and the why will follow.
It's about the process.
It is. And this one's tough, but Pressfield is adamant about this. Professionals accept no excuses. That headache, that urge to reorganize your sock drawer, that's resistance. He even says the pro doesn't even answer the telemarketer.
That's funny.
Because that's resistance on the other end of the line.
Trying to get you off track.
It's about setting boundaries and protecting your work time.
For sure.
And professionals also, as he puts it, play it as it lays.
Dealing with whatever comes up.
Yeah. Setbacks, bad luck, it's all part of the game.
They're mentally prepared for it.
They're focused on managing their internal state, staying committed to the work, rather than getting caught up in achieving immediate success.
And marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. And he really emphasizes the importance of constantly learning and growing.
Mastering your craft.
It's not about waiting for inspiration. It's about putting in the work that actually creates inspiration.
He says it blossoms from the furrows of effort.
I love that. Okay, and then he introduces this really interesting idea of creating distance between yourself and your instrument, your ego.
Yes. Detachment.
It's about being able to assess your capabilities and your work objectively.
Almost like you're evaluating someone else.
He uses the example of Madonna. Like, Madonna the performer is a separate entity from Madonna the person.
A persona.
And this detachment also helps with not taking criticism or failure personally.
Right, because the real battle is internal.
Rejection from editors, clients, whatever, that's not the enemy. Resistance is.
Exactly.
Professionals learn to self-validate. They use criticism as information.
Not as a weapon.
And that resilience he talks about, like, that story of the producer taking phone calls during a pitch.
Staying calm under pressure.
It shows how important it is to stay focused and not get rattled.
And remember that story about Tiger Woods and the camera click?
Oh, yes. He just keeps his eye on the ball.
And that's what professionals do. They don't let external events disrupt their internal focus.
And, as you progress, Pressfield says you start to recognize your limitations and you're willing to bring in experts.
When you need them.
Like agents, consultants, whoever you need. He also talks about the need to adapt, to reinvent yourself as your field changes.
To stay ahead of the curve.
And he says that professionals recognize each other. He uses this phrase, a gun recognizes another gun.
I love that.
There's that shared understanding of the dedication and the struggle.
A shared journey.
It is. I also love his suggestion to think of yourself as a corporation. Me, Inc.
Yes. It creates that healthy distance.
It's like you can step back and make more objective decisions about your work.
You're not so emotionally invested.
Right. You can evaluate your performance. You can celebrate your successes. You can identify areas to improve. all with more clarity.
Like having a board of directors for your life.
It is. And in the end, Pressfield says that the hallmark of a professional is persistence.
That relentless commitment to the work.
Like Ethan Edwards in The Searchers,
Never giving up.
he just keeps going no matter what.
And that's what turning pro is all about.
It's a decision, an act of will. So there you have it, folks. A whole bunch of practical advice on overcoming resistance and becoming a pro.
I think the key takeaway is that it's a process.
It is. It's about recognizing those amateur tendencies and consciously choosing to adopt a more professional mindset.
And it starts with small steps,
Absolutely. So think about a goal you're working on right now.
or one that you want to start.
Where are you being an amateur, and what's one small thing you can do today to be more like a pro?
Maybe you schedule some dedicated work time, or ask for feedback, or just commit to showing up even when you don't feel like it.
We've really focused on the actionable stuff today, but the War of Art has so much more to offer.
It really does.
We highly recommend you check it out. What was one thing that resonated with you today? Something you can start using right away
I'd love to hear from our listeners about that.
as you continue on your creative journey.
And as you're thinking about all of this, here's a question to ponder.
Okay.
If resistance is really pointing us towards our most important work, what amazing rewards might be waiting for us on the other side of that discomfort?
That's a great question to leave everyone with.
Something to think about.
Until next time, happy creating, everyone.
See you then.